Okay, good. Now it's recorded. So we're starting. So here's the text. Probably have it in front of you, but anyway, I'm using a side view, so we could do this. So Tanu Rabbanan. This is a sugya from Masechet Psachim, but this is from the Bavli, and what we're going to do is compare the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, and from this understand how they understood the relationship of Midrash Halakha to Halakha itself, and also from the comparison of the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, we'll learn of the or maybe things that they were trying to hide or to change as an agenda. So the first paragraph reads this: Tanu Banan, the sages taught, Halakha zoni ta'almami b'nei Betera. This law was forgotten by the sons of Betera, which is in itself interesting, because what is the law that is forgotten by those people who are the leaders, the halachic leaders of the generation? The 14th of Nisan once occurred on Shabbat. They forgot and did not know whether Pesach overrides Shabbat or not. So that in itself is already an amazing statement, that you don't know whether you could slaughter the Pesach on Shabbat or not.
Right. And cook.
So cook, you're right, of course, and the whole thing is Sheidat Pesach, and if Pesach, if Pesach follows Shabbat, you have to slaughter on the 14th, and you roast it after sunset. Mm-hmm. So it'll be okay, it'll be already Motzei Shabbat, but the slaughtering will take place on the 14th. But they forgot it. How can you forget such an important thing? That how many halachot did they have at the time? They didn't know what do you do with Pesach on Shabbat. So part of it is that at the time they didn't have the calendar was not set, was not fixed. So it could have been that 30 years passed without having Pesach on Shabbat. It's a possibility, but still, it's a little weird.
They also didn't have a Beit HaMikdash, right?
That's in the time of Beit HaMikdash.
Well, that was in the time of it.
Yeah, because they're talking about practically, and the time of Hillel. Hillel was at the time of the Mikdash, so they practically want to know whether you could or cannot, if you can or cannot slaughter on Shabbat.
Now, would that only have been done at the Beit HaMikdash?
Only at the Beit HaMikdash. Pesach is slaughtered only at the Beit HaMikdash. Now, the reason for the confusion is not mentioned in the Gemara clearly, but to understand it is we have to. We'll see later in the Midrash Halakha that they bring up all the sacrifices that are brought on Shabbat are public sacrifices, and individual sacrifices are not offered on Shabbat.
Right.
But Pesach is a unique sacrifice because on one hand it's individual, each individual brings it, or each family, but it's public. The whole nation brings it at the same time. So it's somewhere, it's on the twilight zone between the public and the individual. But the thing is that either they forgot the tradition that they had, right? Or there's no established halakha, and every year they decided anew, right? They have to discuss the issue again. Maybe not every year, every 30, 40 years. And just to say that how we can forget stuff like that was funny. My brother was visiting from Israel, so my wife decided to ask him once and for all, what was my grandfather's practice regarding using electricity on Yom Tov? Because I keep telling her that he would use electricity on Yom Tov. So she asked my brother, so, because he's older than me, he says, no, he didn't use it. I said, really? You remember that we used to go to his house, he lived with my aunt and her husband, and they would bake whatever, special Shavuot stuff on Shavuot, and would eat it out. I don't remember exactly. So this is because you don't want to remember. Because my brother went a little more, right? So now he doesn't use electricity on Yom Tov. So he reworks his memory to think, we didn't do that. So Bnei Betera is the same thing. If this is a halakha that was problematic, this is what to decide. So what happens? Amru, klum yesh adam sheyodea im Pesach doha et Shabbat im lav. Is there anyone here who knows whether Pesach overrides Shabbat or not? Amru lahem, they said to them, it's like anonymous people, Adam echad yesh she'ala miBavel והלל הבבלי שמו, ששימש שני גדולי הדור שמעיה ואבטליון, ויודע אם פסח דוחה את השבת אם לאו. they told them there is one man who came up from Bavel. His name is Hillel the Babylonian. He served the two eminent scholars of the generation, Shammai and Naphtalion, and he knows whether Pesach overrides Shabbat or not, which is interesting. The problem with this paragraph, the Bnei Betera, the leaders, right, ask a question. And someone says, oh, someone knows the answer. What do you mean someone knows the answer? If you know that he knows, you also know the answer, right?
Not necessarily.
How about, or is Hillel sending maybe a message, says, tell them that I know, maybe that's the thing. I mean, the person who says, it's a specific question. It's not like, who has traditions from Shmaya and Naphtalion? Then you can say, it's Hillel.
Yeah, but we just saw, like my wife's an accountant, and she has a really specific tax problem.
Right.
And she asked all these attorneys, tax attorneys, they didn't know. She asked a friend of hers, a tax attorney, he goes, I don't know, but so-and-so knows. He didn't know the answer, even though he's a well-established tax attorney. Okay,
so the Amurim is among the scholars. So it's not just people from the street. It's people among the scholars. They say, we think that this man knows a tradition. Right. Okay. But for now, at that moment, he's still not known. Hillel is not known to the rabbis. And then it says, Shalhu v'kar'u lo. So they sent out and they called him. אמרו לו, כלום אתה יודע אם הפסח דוחה את השבת אם לאו. Do you know whether Pesach overrides Shabbat or not? אמר להם, וכי פסח אחד יש לנו בשנה שדוחה את השבת. Do we have one Pesach which overrides Shabbat a year? והלא הרבה יותר מ-200 פסחים יש לנו בשנה שדוחים את השבת. We have many more than 200 Pesach a year which override Shabbat. אמרו לו, מניין לך? They said, from where do you know this? Now, what does he refer to? He refers to all the korbanot that come on Shabbat. So now this is what I mentioned before, the difference between the individual sacrifice and the public sacrifice. He says Pesach is a public sacrifice, and we know that every Shabbat you bring the tamid, which are 2 korbanot a day. You have 50 Shabbatot, it's about 100 korbanot. Then add to this the holidays that fall on Shabbat, you get to about 200 sacrifices. So they ask minayin lecha. But the minayin lecha, the question is not how do you know that we bring those two, because they know that as well. What they're asking is about the equation. How do you know that they're comparable? That the korban that we bring on Shabbat is like korban Pesach. Amar lahem. So he said this. Ne'amar mu'ado befesach, ve'ne'amar mu'ado betamid. He said to them, mu'ado, which means at its appointed time, right? The mu'ed is a set or appointed time. He said about Pesach, and the mu'ado is said about the daily offering. Ma mu'ado ha'amur betamid duha et ha-Shabbat, af mu'ado ha'amur bepesach duha et ha-Shabbat. It says, just as mu'ado of the daily offering overrides Shabbat, so too mu'ado of Pesach overrides Shabbat. So he goes with what we call a hekesh, a logical comparison that or gzera shava. Sorry, that's a gzera shava. Gzera shava. It has nothing to do with the word decree, but rather from the word gazar, which is to cut. So like we cut two things by the same measure. You say, I have one set of laws here, one set of laws here. One has all the details, one is missing a detail. So I'll take. I'm saying if these are the laws of it's based on the word. It has to be a word that appears in both places. So in both places, the word b'mu'ado. You must bring the korban at its set time. So he says, just as with the daily sacrifice, set time means on Shabbat, obviously, because you have to bring it every day. So Pesach also, if it says mu'ado, it is set time, which is on the 14th of Nisan. So it seems so easy that you think, why didn't they think of it, right? Ve'od kal v'chomeru. And
that goes back to your question. Is it in fact a public sacrifice?
Right. So he's arguing that it is because of the word bemuado. If it has a set time, that in itself shows that it's not a random, because all the individuals are not set in time. Okay. They are tied to an event. Right. If someone sinned, or someone, a woman had a baby. Right. Or someone wants to show gratitude. So they're all tied to a certain event. They don't depend on time. and even the Korban Hagiga that people bring as they come to Yerushalayim, they can bring it in any day of the holiday, not specific.
Right. Okay.
So that's his argument, but it's based on the word. It's not just logical assumption. It's based on the word. Ve'od kal vachomeru. It says, and furthermore, it's a fortiori, right? How is it a kal vachomer? Uma tamid she'eno anush karet dohet Shabbat. Pesach she'eno anush karet. Pesach she'anush karet. Eno din she'dohet Shabbat. Meaning, if the daily offering, which is not punishable by karet, overrides Shabbat, Pesach, which is punishable by karet, of course, should override Shabbat. So we say if the Pesach has a higher status of the daily offering, because if you don't bring the daily offering, you're not punishable. If you don't bring Pesach, you are punishable. So obviously, that should apply to this as well. Miyad hoshivuhu barosh, and the word miyad is important. Miyad here, I use the translation that was on Sefaria. Which, by the way, I cleaned out all the additions. I wanted to keep it just to the translation of the text because the additions are in itself, they're not just translation. There's a lot of interpretation there, and not always necessarily correct. So the miyad could be immediately, but also as a direct consequence. Miyad in rabbinic literature can also mean which sometimes is also miyad in time, but miyad meaning as a result. Hoshivuhu barosh uminu nasi alem. They seated him at the head and appointed him nasi over them. So, in other words, they seated, right? There's the concession, right? They say, "Oh, you are not worthy of being the nasiim. You should be the nasi." And he was doresh the laws of Passover that entire day. So I left the word doresh in Hebrew because we spoke last week about the darash as to seek out the meaning of the text. So it's interpreting the pasuk so it will apply to Halakha. Yeah. Okay.
And we're talking about Hillel from Babylonia.
Right. So now is it Hillel mekanteran bidvarim. So you start to tease them, which is it's odd, right? Because Hillel is this very calm, very humble person, right? And we don't attribute to him such.
Is this the same Hillel?
Same Hillel.
But I didn't know it was from Babylonia. I thought he lived in Israel.
No, it was from Babylonia. Hillel Zaken came from Babylonia.
Really? This was from the first diaspora.
Yes. No, Shemai and Avtalon are towards the end of the Second Temple.
But it says here, Hillel the Babylonian, who served the two eminent scholars of the generation, Shammai and Avtalon.
Yeah, they were his teachers. So he came from Babylonia, and he studied under Shammai and Avtalon, who lived in Israel. So yeah, he was an exchange student. In other words.
Interesting.
Oh, Shammai and Avtalon were not. Oh, they weren't in Babylonia.
They were in Israel.
They were in Israel.
They were in Israel.
And this is the Hillel and Shammai that we always talk about.
Yeah, always Hillel Zaken that loves everyone so it's really strange that he's is teasing them. Amar lahem mi garam lachem she'e'aleh mi Bavel ve'yeh nasi alechem. What caused you that I should come up from Babylonia and become nasi over you? Avi, feel free to jump in whenever.
So my question is, how come I've never heard of these two teachers of Hillel?
Oh, does he?
I think it's even in Pirkei Avot. So they're mentioned only in Pirkei Avot. Let me check how often they are mentioned in the Talmud. It's really interesting.
But this is the Shammai, right?
No, it's not Shammai. It's Shemaiah, which is interesting because his name is Shemaiah. It's from Shama. And Avtalion sounds like a Hebrew Avtalion, the father of the youth, but very probable that it's a Greek name, or maybe like Talmud. Talmud. Oh, 1 second. Ptolemy. I want to look. Talmud. Let's see. Let's check Sefut Hazar. Issue. Okay. Let's see how many times Avtalion appears in rabbinic literature. Okay, he appears 59 times, but mostly in the Mishnah. In the Talmud, you have him about 10 times. You're right. It's very rare.
Is he in Yerushalmi?
Is in Yerushalmi, yes.
I mean, because
Yerushalmi also, let's see, also about 10 times.
Uh-huh.
So not so much. So the interesting thing here, like you said, obviously is a good point. He's not mentioned that much. Maybe because Hillel overshadowed them. Hillel became the eminent scholar from that school. One of the famous stories about Shmaya V'Avtalion is, I think it appears in Masechet Yoma. It says that the Kohen Gadol was leaving the Kodesh HaKodashim and the Bet HaMikdash after doing the services on Yom Kippur, and everybody was following him. And then Shmaya and Avtalion were coming out of the Bet Midrash, and everybody left the Kohen Gadol and followed them. And the Kohen Gadol got upset, and he said in Aramaic, Yetun lishlam bnei Amemaya, welcome in peace, descendants of the nations, because they were descendants of converts. And they answered, we welcome in peace the descendants of the nation who follow in the footsteps of Aharon, and not the descendants of Aharon who do not follow in the footsteps of Aharon. So that story tells you about the tension that was between the priestly rabbis, leadership and the rabbis. Right. And it's in general, it's a contentious period of people vying for power between what we have is between the Davidic dynasty. Hillel is from the David dynasty, and he comes from Bavel, and he becomes the Nasi. And his masters were apparently in some kind of competition, even though they didn't want that, with the high priest, with the rabbin, with the priestly leadership. So he says, you see, because you were lazy, your laziness in not serving Shemaya and Avtalion, this is what caused you that I will become your Nasi. So we can understand it's not really teasing them. He just says, you have to learn more. You have to be more with your masters. Still not very fitting for Hillel. So now they ask a question, Amrulo. And here it seems like just a random question. Mm-hmm. No, okay, now that we've cleared that, let's move to the next question. Amrulo Rabbi. Shachar. And since I wrote this translation, I wrote Rabbi. That's the way the Sephardic Jews pronounce it. Rabbi and not Rabbi or Rabbi.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. We have ancient manuscript where there's a Yud after the Resh.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Rabbi. So, Shachar velo yavi sakin me'erev Shabbat mahu. They said, okay, so you tell us that you could slaughter the Pesach on Shabbat, but each one has to bring his own knife. That was the custom, right? What if the owner forgot to bring the knife? What do you do? How do you carry the knife from Yerushalayim to the temple? Amar lahen, halakha zo, shamati v'shachachti. I heard this halakha, but I forgot. I don't know the halakha. Which, again, in the one story, you have two instances of people forgetting halachot that are important. Ela hanach lahem liYisrael. Let the people be. Let them do what they need to do. Im en nevi'im hen bnei nevi'im hen. If they're not prophets, they are the children of prophets. And that's a very important statement. I recently wrote an article with a compilation of references to this phrase about between 40 and 60 times in rabbinic in Shalot Utshuvot, that and all of them are used to say, we follow more lenient minhag because we trust the people. And it's an argument for the you could call it grassroots or the dynamic movement, that people understand the halakha and its seed in life better than the rabbis who are more, in their academic ivory towers, right?
Now, what was he teasing to make a point, or
no? He says, really, I don't know what to do. The people will tell us.
Yeah.
He says, I don't know. The people will tell us. Like someone would remember.
Or is he saying, I really know, but this is something that the people should be able to make the
No, I
decision.
don't
Right.
think he knows.
From here, you're right. From here, it's still ambiguous. From
Yeah.
the other story, you'll see that definitely forgot.
Okay.
But here it seems like it could be that he's just telling them, let's see, even maybe you're suggesting that even the people know, right? You
Right.
don't even need me. The people know
Right,
what to do.
right, exactly.
Which, by the way, in itself is interesting. Why? But now that you imply that if the people remember to put the knife the way that what happened, let's see first. למחר מי שפסחו טלה תוחבו בצמרו, מי שפסחו גדי תוחבו בין קרניו. The next day, one whose Pesach was a lamb stuck it in its wool, one whose Pesach was a goat stuck it between its horns. I'll just tell you, it's Tomer called me before, said that it's it's his father's yard-side. So we're like we did brachot, like Kiddush. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
so the people remember they knew what to do. Those who had a lamb, they stuck the knife in the wool, and those who had a goat stuck the knife somehow between the horns. Mm-hmm. But what it tells us is more than just they knew what to do. If they knew what to do, that means that they remembered that Pesach overrides Shabbat.
Right.
So if the rabbis would have waited, okay, let's see what the people do tomorrow. They all come to the temple. They didn't wait for us to issue the halakha. Right. The subliminal message here is really important. Trying to figure out what is going on with the story. When he saw the action, when he saw the act, oh, this is what I've heard from my rabbis. Again, now he goes with tradition. So what we have here is let's sum it up. What happened? There's a halakha that was forgotten. They look for an expert. He comes forth. He produces the halakha by means of logical analysis, kal vachomer and gzera shava. And then because of this knowledge, because of his analytical ability, he is being appointed nasi. He puts down b'nei betera. He forgets the halakha. Now they rely on the people. The people know what to do. And then when they know what to do, at the end, he says, this is what I've heard from my rabbis. So like at the end, he has to revert to tradition.
Well,
but that comes only at the end.
Right. It basically sort of puts him in his place. So there's an unknown, and he comes in, Hillel saves the day.
Yeah.
And he sort of puts the leaders in their place. And so he in turn forgets something, and the people put him in his place.
Right.
So it's just
mirrors
it.
Right. But with all that, it seems like it so happened that he forgot the answer, and then that's when he says sometimes you have to rely on tradition. But if you would ask Hillel in this story up front, what is the most important element of halakha? He would say your analytical prowess. If you could analyze the pesukim, what we call midrash, if you could be doresh halakha, you were able to derive the halakha. And sometimes you have to rely on your shmu'ah, on tradition. So now let's look at the parallel sugya, which predates this one in Talmud Yerushalmi, and a word about the relationship between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, right? But almost nobody studies Talmud Yerushalmi. Like if they want to tell you that someone is really an amazing scholar, he knows the Yerushalmi. Most people don't study it. They don't teach it in the yeshivot, and they say it's obfuscated. It's hard to understand. It's convoluted. Whatever. There are different descriptions for
what
the
do you
Yerushalmi.
think about it?
So no, it's not what I think. So what scholarship thinks about it, and what we know today, is that for many years, for many centuries, there was a competition between the yeshivot of Israel and those of Babylonia over the position of power, who controls the world, the Jewish world, the world of Torah, right? And it had to do with power, with money, everything. And at a certain point, the Babylonian yeshivot launched a very aggressive campaign against the Eretz Israel yeshivot. That was in the 7th, 8th century. And they said that the rabbis who led it, the one famous scholar his name was Pirkoi ben Bavoy, and he wrote that the Torah of Eretz Yisrael is Torah Shmad, is Torah that was written or taught under persecution, and because there's persecution, they were unable to keep the tradition. There is evidence from the Geniza that before Maimonides wrote his Mishneh Torah, he wrote a book called Piskei Hilchot Yerushalmi. He called all the halachot from the Yerushalmi. We also have, from the Geniza, a book called Sefer Hilukei HaMinhagim Sheben Bnei Mizrach LeBnei Ma'arav, the differences between the people of the East and people of the West. East being Bavel, West Eretz Yisrael. And there's some interesting things there, like the way they do Shechita, the way they would say Kaddish when there are only 7 people in the room, and other things like that, different versions of Tefillah, etc. But eventually this campaign succeeded, and people said, okay, the Yerushalmi is not reliable, we're not going to study it. And what happened as a result was that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when you stop studying a text like that relies heavily on oral tradition and on the understanding of lexicography of foreign words, if you don't study it from someone who really knows what's written, then you're bound to not only misunderstand, but misinterpret the text and even change it. When you copy, scribes who copy for the next person to use the manuscript don't know what's written. So the amount of words in Latin and Greek in the Talmud Yerushalmi is about 3,000 words. 1,000 words is enough to have a conversation. So 3,000 words that you don't know, can imagine how that changes the approach. Also, the whole approach of Talmud Yerushalmi to understanding the Mishnah is different than that of the Bavli, and that was rejected. So as a result, by the 11th, 12th century, really most scholars already were alienated from the Yerushalmi. So now let's see this halakha, this story here. And I didn't translate the whole thing, just the highlight. I just put in bold the words that are really important. So, I didn't put it in the screen, sorry. So here's the Yerushalmi. Zo halakha ne'alma miziknei betera. The same thing, they didn't know what to do. Amru, yesh kan bavli ehad veHillel shmo. Right, so we have to make, now to compare that to the original text.
The man here, as opposed
to right, before it was yesh kan adam ehad she'ala Bavel. There's a one man who came up from Bavel.
Right.
That is a little more dignified than saying yesh kan bavli ehad. There's a certain Babylonian here, right?
Right.
Okay. Sheshimesh et Shmaya ve'Avtalion, who served Shmaya ve'Avtalion. Also difference. Previously, it was written in the Bavli, it's Shnei Gdolei Ador, the 2 eminent scholars of the generation. They're giving this title, but in Yerushalmi, Shmaya ve'Avtalion, those 2 guys. Okay. יודע אם פסח דוחה את השבת אם לאו, אפשר שיש ממנו תוחלת. Maybe there's hope from him, right?
Right.
So it's not certain. Maybe we could get something from him. Shalhu v'ka'u lo, they sent and they called him, and they says, Shamata miyamecha. Now this also I had to put in bold. Look at the difference. In the Bavli, in the first page, Shalhu v'ka'u lo, amru lo, klum ata yodea, do you know whether Pesach overrides Shabbat or not? In the Yerushalmi's rendition, amru lo, Shamata miyamecha. What are they asking him? If he heard from his masters. Do you have a tradition? Avi?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I hear your microphone. I thought you wanted to join in. Okay. So you see the difference that, first of all, he's called Babylonian and not a man who came from Babel.
Right.
Shmaya ve'Avtalion are not called Gedolei Ador. Right. They say maybe there's hope from him. And when they ask him, they say, did you ever hear? Right. Do you have a tradition?
Right. So they're not asking him the answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Amar lahen. So he said, אמר להם, וכי אין לנו פסח אחד בלבד דוחה את השבת בכל שנה ושנה, והלא כמה פסחים ידחו את השבת בכל שנה. The same as we had in the Bavli, more or less, right? It's not only one Pesach, we have many korbanot that override Shabbat. אמרו לו,
they make him Nasi?
They do, but in a different way. אמרו לו, you see it's much longer here. אמרו לו, כבר אמרנו שיש עמך תוחלת. Okay, it seems like we were right. There is hope from you, right? התחיל דורש להן, so he started doing the דרש, מהיקש, ומקל וחומר, ומגזרה שווה. So here there are three elements. In the Bavli, there were only two. One was gzera shava, the similar word b'muado, and one the kal v'chomer, the a fortiori of this is not punished karet, and you still bring it on Shabbat, even more so. Okay. Here he adds another one called hekesh. What is the hekesh? Hekesh is a logical comparison. What is the comparison? Oil v'tamid korban tzibur ufesach korban tzibur. Ma tamid korban tzibur doher Shabbat, afesach korban tzibur doher et Shabbat. This is exactly the problem. This is on the top of page 3 out of the 4, right? No, it's on the back of 2. Yeah, just over there. Yes. So he says the daily sacrifice is a public sacrifice, and so is Pesach. So just as the daily sacrifice overrides Shabbat, so should Pesach. But this is exactly the problem. Is it public or not? What makes something public? Is it the ownership or the act of simultaneous sacrificing? So Hillel says we all bring it at the same time. Right. But in reality, each one owns it, his own. All the other public sacrifices were owned collectively by the people,
and they were done by the Kohanim.
Done by the Kohanim as representative, right? So, and then in the regular font, I left the Kal V'Chomer and the Gzera Shava, which are the same as the Bavli. But here's the difference. Up until now, we had like minor differences, right, in phrasing and one addition Hekesh. But here we see a completely different reaction. In what happened in the Bavli when he came with his drashot, miyad minu nasi alem. Immediately they appoint him nasi. You're the greatest, or you're the wisest, etc. Okay. Here, what happens? Amulo kvar amarnu im yesh tohelet mibavli. Didn't we say that you can't rely on a Babylonian, right? So the commentators ask here, but before they said yes. They said no. Before they were asking, doubting. Maybe. Now they say for sure, no. What?
My dad used to say that all the time. All the time.
So they say, we know that we couldn't rely on you guys. Why? Hekesh she'amarta yesh lo tshuva. The logical comparison you made can be rejected. How? Can be refuted. Tamid has a set amount, but the Pesach does not. And I looked at the Mefarshim. Nobody clearly explains what is that idea of kitzbah or set amount. It's a term that appears in many other midrashei halakha, but it's not clear what it does with Pesach. I think that what it means is this: Tamid has a set time and the number of korbanot that must be brought throughout the year, right? Now Pesach. 1 year could be 1,000 korbanot, and another year 10,000. Depends on how many people bring it. So their argument might be, even if Pesach must be brought on Shabbat, maybe on Pesach that falls on Shabbat, you bring only one to represent the whole nation, and you have no proof. Or in other words, they're saying this is not really a korban tzibur. Your whole argument was it's a korban tzibur, but it's not. Now. Kal v'chomer, the Kal v'chomer was accepted in the Bavli, but here they say, Kal v'chomer she'amarta, yesh lo tshuva. The a fortiori that you argued can be refuted. Why? What is the Kal v'chomer? Kal v'chomer is when you prove that A is weaker than B, so B must have all the laws of A as well. But if you prove, how do you refute it? If say A is weaker than B in one point, but stronger in another point. So then you say there's no comparison. Right. Those are like apples and oranges, really, because they are two different concepts. So they say this. Lo, im amarta betamid shu kodesh kodashim, tomar befesach shu kodashim kalim. There's a difference. Tamid is called kodesh kodashim. It's a higher level of holiness. it's totally burnt. It's olat tamid, and cannot be taken out of the boundary. It's called mechutz laklaim. Cannot be eaten. Cannot be found outside a certain boundary. Whereas the Pesach is called Hashim Kalim, is the light, right? We can call it the holy light. It's like a diet holy. So it's called Hashim Kalim. It is eaten, and it can be eaten all over Yerushalayim. So what we find here is that Pesach is more strict than Tamid on one point, the punishment, but is lesser than Pesach in the level of holiness. So there's no comparison, there's no Kal Homer. So they refuted the Hekesh, yes.
Oh, just going back to the first one, the Tamid, by being a set amount, makes it public because it's not variable on the number of people. So sort of based on what you were saying,
right?
Whereas the Pesach offering is going to differ from year to year because it's variable on the number of people. Once it's variable on the number of people, you could argue it's an individual,
right,
and not a public.
Exactly. So that's what they're arguing with him. So now, what about Gzera Shava? They say Gzera Shava she'amarta. En adam dan gzera shava me'atzmo. So the gzera shava that you argued, one cannot make a gzera shava on his own, and that in itself opens, another box that maybe I don't know if we can do today, but we'll go back to it. But basically, what they're telling him here is you made up this gzera shava. This is your mahalach, as we call it. This is your process. And you cannot make it up. Why? They say, we would have thought that if logic is a valid tool, right? Mm-hmm. Why do you block it? Why do you say, we don't accept this logical analysis? It seems to be valid. Moado, right? It's the same as at time. And there's a long discussion here that we'll skip for now, showing that if you use Gzera Shava, you could do whatever you want. You could. They call it you will switch the laws of Tum'at Met, the purity of a dead body with that of a dead animal. So you cannot do Gzera Shava on your own. Fine.
What is? Can you translate that?
What?
Gzera Shava.
So Gzera Shava is the comparison of two words that appear in two paragraphs. So it says Bemuado, and here it says Bemuado. So just as the Muado set time that is said about the daily sacrifice means at the set time, even on Shabbat. So also the Mu'ado of Pesach means at the set time, even on Shabbat. And they said, it's very nice, makes sense, but it's your thing. We cannot accept it. You have to have tradition. So already that now connects to the first question that they presented to him. They said, did you ever hear? In the Bible, they said, do you know? So if you know your own knowledge, fine. But in the Yerushalmi, they say, did you ever hear? So they said, did you hear this Gzera Shava? He says, no, it's mine. He says, sorry, we don't accept it. So I'll skip it. What?
I thought Gezerot Shavot were given to Moshe Sinai.
Oh, that's...
it's the same idea. We don't make them up.
Yes. So that's later here. They say, En Adam Dan Gzera Shava, Ela Im Ken Shama Merabo. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah, so they passed down.
Shava if you heard it from your Rabbi, from your master. But there's another rule about Gzera Shava, and that is, En Danin Gzera Shava, Ela Im Ken Mufne. You could only say Gzera Shava if one of the words that you're using is superfluous. If it's needed for the clarity of the text, you cannot use it. One of them has to be redundant. And some say even more, says both words in both ends have to be redundant. Otherwise you cannot do the Gzera Shava. So now...
Redundant, you mean that we don't use them for another ruling?
What?
By redundant, you mean we don't use them for another ruling? They're not part of another halacha?
Yes, but you learn nothing from them except for this Gzera Shava.
Gotcha.
But now the problem is that if you say that you could only say Gzera Shava if you heard it from the rabbi, right? So your rabbi heard it from his rabbi all the way up to Moshe Rabbeinu. So why do I need the other rule of you need redundancy to make the drash. You don't need that rule. So the Tosafot, I think, tried to answer this question, saying this is only, the second rule is only a yardstick to verify which Gzerah Shava is a tradition and which is not. Like they had a set number of Gzerot Shavot, but they didn't know which is which doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But we'll get back to it later. I want to just finish up this story, and then we'll go back to it. So we see the pattern in the Yerushalmi. Hillel is not held at such high regard, nor his teachers. They speak about the whole, Babylonian community in a degrading manner, and they want to have tradition, not drashot. They say very nice. All your drashot we can refute, and the one which you cannot refute has no tradition, right? We don't even look for a logical argument to that. So now turn the page, and what we see here is this, and this is like now is a stark difference with the Bavli. Even though he was sitting and doresh all day long, lo kiblu mimenu. They did not accept his teachings. This is the opposite of the Bavli. The Bavli said, he said two drashot, and right away, you're the Nasi, go ahead. Here, no, he's talking all day, he's trying to convince them, they don't listen to him. Ad she'amar lahem, yavo alai. Yavo alai is an oath. I swear. Kach shamati mishmaya ve'avtalion. This is what I've heard from Shmaya ve'avtalion. And kevan shesham'u mimenu, and again the word shama, the emphasis is on tradition. Kevan shesham'u mimenu ken amdu uminu oto nasi alein. Then they appointed him a nasi. So all of his abilities in analyzing the halakha and making comparison, beautiful, not enough. You have tradition. That's what you hear from your rabbis. We respect you. Now you're going to be the nasi. Now, his teasing is also different. Kevan sheminu oto nasi aleim, התחיל מקנטרם בדברים. He started teasing them ואומר, מי גרם לכם לצרוך לבבלי הזה? Why you need to rely on that Babylonian? Right? Yeah, I know that you disrespect us, but why do you have to rely on me? לא על שלא שימשתם לשני גדולי עולם. You didn't serve the two scholars, now he calls them scholars, שמעיה ואבטליון, שהיו יושבים אצלכם. You have them, they sit among you, and you didn't listen to them. So now his rebuke makes more sense. It's not just why do you have someone else as your Nasi. You have a Babylonian as your Nasi. Why? Because this Babylonian was wise enough to come and learn from the rabbis of Israel. So in a way, he says, I admit that your Torah is superior. This is before the campaign against the Babylonian. This is like the first century or even before. It says, the Babylonian came and learned from the Israeli scholars, and therefore I'm better than you. And then the next paragraph here is, Kevan shekinteram bidvarim, because he teased them, they asked him, what about the knife? So now here it's clear. They didn't just ask a question. They said, since you're so smart, right, you think that you could tease us, what about the knife? And then he says, I don't know, right? So I think it's shocking. Like when I was in Yeshiva, we didn't learn the Yerushalmi. I knew this sugya. It's a beautiful story. Here's Hillel. He comes with his power of analysis. They appoint him Nasi, and all is nice and dandy. But then you look at the Yerushalmi, and no, they put up a fight. We don't accept it. We want tradition. Until it comes to tradition, they don't. So what's going on here? So this is an example, what we spoke about last week, of Hillel being an innovator. Hillel and the school of Hillel, even though he relies on tradition, there are many other places where he did not rely on tradition, apparently. Because once he becomes a Nasi, how do you know that everything he does is based on tradition? Right?
We're also seeing a major difference between Yerushalayim and Bavli, right? That one is saying, look, we're on our own. We need to figure this out.
Yes.
The other is saying, no, we don't figure it out. We just have to know what our parents did, and if we don't know that, we're in trouble.
We do nothing,
We
right?
do nothing, yeah.
So now there's another interesting story that is not here, but also has to do with Bnei Betera just much later. Those descendants of Betera come back at the time of Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai, who was at the generation of the destruction.
Right.
And the story is, I'll tell you where exactly it is. The story is that in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, it appears in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Kaftet Bet, page 29, Amud Bet. And what happens here is this. That's after the destruction. Again, a Shabbat problem, but this is not about forgetfulness. It's the first Rosh Hashanah after the destruction. Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbat, and the question is, should we blow the shofar or not? And here's the question is different. The question is different because there's no tradition. There's a new reality. What Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai is trying to show is that the center of power has moved from Yerushalayim and is now in Yavne. So, which is now the seat of the Bedin. So here this is, Amar lehem Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai livnei Betera, Nitka, or Nitka, Amru lo Nadun. So Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai, who is not of the Davidic dynasty, is not a descendant of Hillel, he's an outsider that was brought in by the Romans because they didn't want someone from the Davidic dynasty who could claim, to be the next leader.
Right.
So he's sort of an outsider. It tells the Bnei Betera that for some reason are now again in the seat of power. He says, let us blow the shofar. Because now everybody's like, we are the center. They say, lo, nadun, let us discuss it. Right? So there's no tradition, so let's see if we could argue in favor of the shofar. Amar lahem nitka v'hakach nadun. He says, no, let us blow the shofar. Everybody's here, everybody's waiting. Let's blow the shofar, and then let's discuss it. And then we'll issue a verdict, whether, it will be so for years to come. La'achar shetakru amru lo nadun. So now they blew the shofar, everybody goes home.
They did blow it.
And they did blow it, right? He convinced them to do it, right?
Good.
They took action. They said, okay, let's discuss now. Amar lahem kvar nishme'a keren beyavne. We already blew the shofar, everybody heard it. Ve'en meshivin le'achar ma'aseh. You can't turn the wheel back once it was done. It was a man of action, right? He created a tradition.
Right.
Very interesting, because with Hillel here we say ra'a ma'aseh v'niskar halakha. The ma'aseh is extremely important. If you know that something was done, but in future generation, right? Even that was undermined, because they say they turn it over. They would ask when someone said, "I saw my rabbi doing this and that." They say, "Ma'aseh ra'ita or halakha shama'ata." Did you see him doing it only, or did you hear from him it's a law? What's the difference? Because maybe if you did it, there was a special reason that you're not aware of. So, in a way, this whole thing was turned around. We don't care about what people did in reality, right? And that carries on all the way to today. For example, when the Hazon Ish came up with the idea that the volumes of for drinking wine or washing hands are double or triple what they were in the past, some people asked him, but wait a second. If you say that this is the right measure of Revi'it, is like, half a gallon, whatever, it's one like a quart almost, right? How come we don't have kiddush cups from the medieval times till today with that volume or washing vessels? He says we don't care about that. Like, reality is not a proof. Reality of what people did is not a proof. Halakha reigns supreme. So that is this story that I wanted to share that shows what Hillel was doing. Hillel was introducing halakha that is based on logic, and of course, in the Orthodox community, people argue that everything was halakha leMoshe Misinai, but we see that it's not.
Right.
There's a different version between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. Right. The Bavli actually argues more for the ability to use the midot and do whatever you want. So just in briefly, we'll touch about what happens with the Kal Vachomer, with the Gzera Shava. This is one of the the issues that my professor Gilat from Bar Ilan worked on the Midot. And his theory about the Gzerah Shavah is as follows. He says Gzerah Shavah originally was a purely logical tool. And it was not based on similar words, because there are similar words all over but rather a word that stands for a concept. So when Hillel says, it says bemu'ado here, it doesn't mean that we are going to compare the laws because we have the same word. Rather, he says, what is the concept of a mu'ado? Mu'ado means set time that will not change. So if the Torah, and it makes a lot of sense, if the Torah says you must bring the Tamid on the set time, which is morning and evening every day, that includes Shabbat. Therefore, take it to Pesach. The Torah says Pesach comes on the 14th.
Right.
Make sure it's sacrificed on the set time.
Right.
Every year on the 14th, Shabbat
Right.
or not Shabbat.
Right.
So it's right.
Right.
What happened was that over time, people started using the Gzerah Shavah freely and going to places where you cannot go. Because like they say, it says Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim. It says shamayim here, right? In another place it says shamayim. Then you can make a mishmash out of the whole Torah. So the rabbis made the first the first restriction, which is the word has to be redundant in one, at least in one or even two places.
Redundant
meaning that it's not necessary for the actual text, so you could use it for the darash. But even that was abused. So then they came with a new restriction saying you could only say Gzerah Shavah if you heard it from your rabbi. And now it makes sense because it didn't start, Avi, that's what you asked me before, if it comes all the way from Sinai. If it would have come all the way from Sinai, all the other restrictions don't make sense. But somewhere around the 1st century, they said you could only use it if you have a reason. The superfluous word is your anchor in the text. There's a problem in the text that calls for attention. Why do we have this word here? Then, okay, let's use it for drasha. And then about 100 years later, they said, no, that's it, no more. No more nu gzerot shavot unless you heard it from your rabbi. And maybe it already at the time of Hillel, this restriction was put because they already tell him, you cannot do your own gzerah shavah unless your rabbi did it.
This is before the destruction, though.
Before the destruction. So what happened was that up to a certain point, they allowed the free use of this gzerah shavah, and then they had to limit it in two stages. But what it tells us is that probably a lot of what we find in Midrash Halakha in terms of the interpretation of the text and the conclusion that is derived from the text, we cannot easily argue that they are all tradition or Halakha Moshe Sinai. Right. First of all, the difference between the two stories, the difference itself, and the tension between the two, where like the Bavli is trying to hide something. The Bavli plays a lot with Midrash Halakha. So the Bavli is like saying we cannot let you know what is written in the Yerushalmi, because the Yerushalmi says that you have to have tradition. So this is what we see from this discussion.
Isn't the Bavli approach less conservative?
It is less conservative, right?
Yeah. So
by hiding tradition,
right.
It is less conservative because
right.
it has. Yeah.
So, but it's interesting that now it's come the other way, that you need the tradition.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. Sure.
So the Bavli became preeminent over the
Yerushalmi, right?
But the takeaway, at least in the comparison here, has gone the other way.
Right. So what happened with the Bavli over time is the Bavli became canonized, but it was not canonized by the Geonim. It was canonized by Rambam and his generation, like in the 11th century, 12th century. The Geonim still had sort of a free hand with the Talmud, both in arguing with the Talmud and in rewriting certain versions, like this is the right version, that is the right version. And that went on even, parallel to Rambam, Rabbeinu Hananel and the Rifte, but a little before Rambam, who still had this authority or that strength of arguing with the Talmud. But Rambam put a lid on it, partly because, I would say, not as much because he wanted to solidify the authority of the Talmud, because he wanted to solidify his own authority. So he had to create a system where, at a certain point, that's it. You cannot question the sages of the previous generation, in this case, the Talmud.
So in a sense, he's the father of Orthodox Judaism.
In a sense, you could say that. It's definitely the father of dogmatic Judaism, because there was no, when he created the dogma in Judaism in terms of philosophy and Jewish thought, and is very much also affected Halakha, because if you go, what he did really, a great gift that he gave to the yeshiva world is to let them try and reconcile his writing with the Talmud.
Yeah.
The whole, without Rambam, there would be no yeshivot, because they recited the Talmud, and okay, they grow tired of it.
Right.
But the Rambam constantly sort of contradicts the Talmud, and they tried to reconcile it.
Interesting.
Instead of understanding the Rambam, as much as he gave authority to the Talmud,
reconcile it
to liyashev b'neim. The Rambam really created his own shita, his own way. When he needed the Bavli, he relied on it, and when he wanted to rule differently, he did it also. So, but that is just we sort of like looking at the structure of Midrash Halakha, and this is one of the telling stories of where Midrash Halakha really stands.
So when was the restriction on blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah when it falls on Shabbos instituted?
It comes. The Mishnah already says that you cannot carry the shofar on Shabbat, and but the Mishnah is from the 3rd century. By that time, they would only blow the shofar when there is a bedin. The argument that you can't blow the shofar is really because you might carry it. Was over. They were able to bypass it to Eretz Yisrael by chaining the shofar to the teva, because they know it's really not a problem. And up until the time of Rabbi Tzchak Alfasi in the 10th century, in his bedin they would blow the shofar on Shabbat in North Africa. I did a paper on that from another professor, Meir Bar Ilan, about the Tkiyat shofar and בשופר, במקדש ובגבולים. So the problem really is about blowing shofar on Shabbat. It's not because the blowing of shofar is a transgression of Shabbat, but rather because shofar was seen as something that is done only in the temple. Right. So that's why we see that tension after the destruction. Rabbi Yochanan says we blow the shofar even in Yavne, and they say no, you don't blow it in Yavne. Because you don't have, it's only done at the temple. That's where the shofar is blown. So
now the times of the temple, was it only blown at the temple?
Only the temple.
Nowhere else. Even when they had synagogues at that time.
Yes. Now the irony of what happens today is that we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah.
That's not irony. It's painful.
Yeah, the pain, right? The big problem is that we know in terms of the calendar that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Aleph Tishrei, and the second one is Bet Tishrei.
Right.
So, if you want to say really which day is Rosh Hashanah, it's Aleph Tishrei. But if Shabbat falls on Aleph Tishrei, falls on Shabbat, we don't blow the shofar then. We blow it on the second day, which is really there's something that has to be restored. We'll see how we can do that.
Yes, and that's of course the big question, because we have the Talmud being canonized.
Yeah.
Not because of the Sanhedrin.
No. No, it's a much later development.
Right, and so why can't we reopen it?
Is it true that for the Shomonim, for the begin like Rosh Hashanah for them it's in Passover?
No. The difference is that they bring Korban Pesach on Pesach, real Korban.
Right, but they're saying also that
the
beginning of the year.
The beginning of the year, not Rosh Hashanah. Yes. Yeah,
it's supposed to be.
That's a different story. That's already a different story. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our calendar is very much influenced by our the time we spend in Babylonia in the Galut. But your question is a serious one in Halakha today. It's the question is what was the objective of the rabbis when they created the Gzerot? And if we understand that their objective was to preserve Halakha, then you have then it branches out into two camps. You can say mainly two camps. One camp says there's this abstract entity called Halakha or Torah that must be observed, and it doesn't matter how many people observe it, even if it's 10% or 5 or even 1% of the Jewish people. Maybe even 1% is enough, because that is like sort of mythical thing that makes the world exist. So everything that the rabbis added must be observed, because that's the perfect Torah as God wants it. That's one way to see it. If you see it that way, you can never change a Gzerah, because it's etched for stone for generations. On the other hand, you could look at it this way. The rabbis made the decrees in order to make sure that the people will observe the Torah. So the ideal would be to have as many people as possible observe the Torah. So if that is the case, the rabbis would come back to life today. They would freak out, because they say, "What happened to Judaism?
Right.
We have 15% of the people of the nation observe the Torah."
Right.
So they would have sat down.
When was it higher?
When was it higher?
How many times? Times and for how long was it higher?
It's a good question. In the time of the first temple, probably not so good.
Right.
But that's pre-rabbinic Judaism. In the time of the second temple, maybe a little more. In the 2,000 years that we were in exile, up until the 17th century, you could say maybe 50%, 60%, or even more were observant. But now everything, is really falling apart in that sense, in terms of what people see as the traditional tenets of halakha, like kashrut, Shabbat, etc. If we look also at the Ben Adam L'Havero, Jews are doing pretty good, being hopefully civilized and law-abiding, etc. But in the traditional way of seeing, like the observance of Shabbat and all that, where is that? So the question is, the rabbis made a decree of not, of waiting 6 hours between, let's say, not the rabbis, really it's related in the Talmud. But what if you eased some of the Gzerot? Let's say Yom Tov Sheni, right? Second Yom Tov, right? Could it make some people more people observe Yom Tov? Maybe.
Yeah.
Or Rosh Hashanah, maybe they would. So that's the big debate. Most rabbis in the Orthodox community, in the Orthodox world, would argue that you cannot reassess or reevaluate any of the decrees of the rabbis.
Sad.
I know one rabbi would disagree. At least one rabbi would disagree. Probably there are more. Okay, let's.
Rabbi, can I just? I'm having a logical difficulty.
Yes.
Rambam is the one who sort of said, "Look, we've got to set these laws and just stick with them, and not keep adjusting and changing and updating." But he based it on the Talmud Bavli. He wasn't a big fan of the Yerushalmi. And if I understood you correctly, the Talmud Bavli is the one that said, or the way Hillel presents it, is Bavli is the community that said that you can derive laws. The whole goal of this is to be able to use things like Kal V'chomer, Gzer Shava, and other tools to be able to derive laws, whether you've learned them from your teacher or not, which would lead you to say you can continue to derive laws. So why is it the Rambam is viewed as sort of the point at which we have stopped feeling empowered to derive new laws or to change laws, and to basically say that anything that the rabbi has set is set in stone, it's never going to be changed?
No, but the Rambam does say that he says that that you cannot change anything that was written in the Talmud. Says the Geonim maybe, right? Says the Geonim can do that.
Mm-hmm.
The Geonim can argue that, and he puts himself and other contemporaries at the level of Geonim. That if you look at his Akdama, the way he changes the definition of Geonim to include himself as well. So we could argue with them, but they're the last Geonim. That's it. From now on, you cannot argue. So Rambam really, like I said, put the lid on it.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly what he created. He created that system which says that we cannot argue with it anymore. And there are a lot of scholars today who are followers of Maimonides. Now, of course, the Brisk school, Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph Faul, also same thing, are very strictly Maimonidean and say that you cannot question any of the gezerot of Hachamim.
What did Rabbi Ovadia Yosef come out?
No, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, no. His emphasis, his focus of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef is on Shulchan Aruch.
Mm-hmm.
He took as his champion the Shulchan Aruch, and he says we all follow the Shulchan Aruch, even though the Shulchan Aruch is an open-ended book, but he interprets as he wishes. It's another issue. Yeah. Okay. So we'll have to go maybe through the introduction of Maimonides to see exactly what he says there. He's
a little bit arrogant, though. All right. Well, thank you very, very much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. All the best. Bye.
Are you going to do it again next week?
No. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Toda rabba.
Bye. Kotu.
Bye.
Wait.
We'll say the Kaddish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the snacks.